Get some insight now on the Cal Golden Bears coming to this one 3-0. We got Jim McGill. He is the editor of Cal Insider, calinsider.com. Thanks for taking time out, Jim. Man, I hope everybody's able to maybe go over to YouTube and watch at least this segment to see the backdrop behind you. I think it's so cool because there's a level of arrogance down here in this part of the country, Jim, when it comes to sports, especially college sports, that we've got it the best and we care the most. And you look like you're quite the sports fan too. What's the most proud, I guess, piece of memorabilia you got behind you there?
That it's hard to say. There's a lot to choose from. I think the Joe DiMaggio one, the black and white, I got at the Hall of Fame. I've got an actual Joe DiMaggio autograph in it. Not signed for me personally, but by somebody that I know. So I think that's a really cool one. But I have a deep love for lots of different sports, and ever since I could walk and talk, that was there. So that you see that in my den for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, so Jim, this will be the first ACC game as we welcome the Golden Bears to the Atlantic Coast Conference. Bring your A game. Not quite the Conference of Champions of the Pac-12. Just how big of a game do you think this is for Cal, despite the fact that Florida State comes into this limping, despite being the conference champions, defending conference champions at 0-3? Just how much sort of juice is there? How much focus do you think Justin Willcox and the Golden Bears have for this one?
It's an interesting question because I think most Cal fans assumed that this was basically an unwinnable game coming into the season. But every year presents different challenges, especially in this NIL era. You guys had so many guys go to the pros, double digits, and but still everybody knows there's a lot of talent there. Sometimes it just takes a while to blend. Sometimes it's the personality mix. Sometimes it's just how different skill sets match with each other. And Cal fans are basically aware that they don't want this to be the week that FSU figures it out and gets it going. But I'll tell you, ever since the ACC thing was announced, and ever since it was discovered that Florida State was the very first ACC game, and it was a road game in Doak Stadium, I can't tell you how fired up Cal fans were from minute one. So yeah, the start's a little confusing to Cal fans, but nonetheless, it's a real exciting matchup coming up.
Yeah. So this is season 9, if I'm not mistaken. Kind of take a big picture look at the Golden Bears and Justin Willcox, and things haven't been able to match, I guess, that 8 wins that he got in 2019. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong here. He's Oregon through and through. I think at one point might have been kind of a candidate. I don't know if he actually I thought he might have even turned down the job after Mario Cristobal left Oregon to go down to Miami. But just how have things kind of progressed over the last few years with Justin Willcox, and the staff seems to have some continuity. Does he finally feel that maybe he's got the things in place to kind of build a winner? I know after the San Diego State game last week, he said, we're all learning to kind of win at every level of this program right now. Do you think they've got the sort of right mix and feel confident with where they're at?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Willcox did play at Oregon. He grew up in Junction City, just in the shadow of Eugene. I think his dad, Dave Willcox, was a Duck too. But yes, they did offer him the second time around. The first time they talked to him in a previous opening. The second time they offered him, I told people, I told an Oregon beat writer, I don't think he'll take the job, and he was incredulous. Why in the world would he not take the Oregon job? It's one of the premier coaching jobs in the country. I said, because he's wired differently. The way that Oregon is right now is kind of flashy. It's you're in a fishbowl there, and that's not really his style. He is the lowest key, down to business guy that you'll find as a head coach out there. No ego. He just wants to be in a position where he can get things done with quality people around him. People thought he was coach on the rise. The records got a little bit better each year. Got to a bowl game and won the bowl game and had 8 wins, and then COVID hit. There's a lot of adversity that Cal faced. It was a little bit of a unique brand compared to what a lot of other programs face. Came out of that, just never really recaptured the magic. Last year was a disaster 2/3 of the way through the season, and they turned around and won 3 straight games before the bowl game. And then started this season winning 3 straight games. So six straight last regular season games. I think the big difference is that the portal has been a game changer. You know very well, Florida State's been big in the recruiting game for a long time, but you have to show it on the field to get the top level high school recruits. But with the portal, these guys, a lot of them have seen Cal, and they're like, I really like Cal, but they're not quite good enough for me to commit to them. And they commit to a big stage somewhere else. And maybe they don't like the environment so much. Maybe they're even doing well, but they're looking for something more. He's brought in a bunch of these quality guys that maybe they performed well in their previous spot. Maybe they didn't really live up to expectations, and maybe this is the opportunity. He's got the right mix of guys. And I've seen this program, man, I'm telling you, 50 years I started following this Cal program, and I've never seen the level of depth that they have right now. They've had better teams for sure. They've had high-end talent like Aaron Rodgers and Marshawn Lynch and Tony Gonzalez and Cameron Jordan and so many guys that have not only been good college players but have been stars in the NFL and are headed for the Hall of Fame, but they haven't had the depth. Now they've got the quality depth. Maybe they're not quite as good as the starters, but there's not a significant drop-off. If you looked at who was backing up those stars I mentioned before, in most position groups, it was a massive drop-off. So when there was injuries, forget it. Cal's had 5 or 6, actually 7 big injuries this year, and we've seen a lot of starters miss every game or most of the games, including Jade Knott, one of the best running backs in the country. But they keep rolling because they have depth. So that's the big difference I think you're seeing this year.
Can't forget about Deshaun Jackson. I think Florida State even tried to recruit him at some point, but he stayed on the West Coast there, went from Poly to Berkeley. So
Yeah.
definitely some big time talent has been there at Cal. Offensively, everything everywhere seemingly starts at the quarterback spot. Fernando Mendoza is just an extremely earnest, likable young man. He seems to be really efficient early on here in the season, especially what he was able to do down on the plains against Auburn. How impressed are you with that young man? And just, I don't know how surprising, or have you guys seen this coming the way that he's been able to kind of perform early on this season?
Mendoza's a unique guy. I mean, he came in as a 2-star recruit, late addition in the class. People didn't know what to expect from him. They struggled a lot with their first 2 in the 2 deep last year. Sam Jackson had injuries. He had a lot of turnovers. Ben Finley came in from North Carolina State, played pretty good in the first game when Jackson got injured, but then he just absolutely fell apart. So Mendoza was thrust into this role as starting quarterback as a redshirt freshman. Usually you see young quarterbacks kind of groomed and eased into the situation. He didn't expect to play more than a couple snaps last year. So he did a lot of good things last year, but he was turnover prone, particularly with fumbles. He wasn't big and strong enough to be able to withstand the contact that he put himself in sometimes when he'd scramble or if the line missed a block. He's gained 20 pounds of muscle in the off season. So he's able to take some blows, and he's taken some big shots this year for sure. But you won't find a guy that works harder than him. You talked about his personality that you've seen a little bit. What you see is what you get. This is a guy that will not leave any stone unturned to make himself the best quarterback that he can be. He may not be Aaron Rodgers when it comes to just pure talent, but he has enough of a skill set, and he has the work mentality to absolutely get every ounce of talent out of his body, basically. And he's growing. I mean, the last couple of weeks, you've seen 70+% completion rate, and that's a real sign that he's taking the next step and turning the corner as a quarterback. So it'll be really interesting to see where he continues to develop and how he ends up.
Isaiah Hunter's a guy that it seems like there's been some good chemistry early on between, Mendoza and he. How would you kind of I know everyone thinks about Jade Knott. We'll get to the running back and how important this running game is. But in terms of the passing game, I don't know if it's so much a deep shot, chunk play sort of receiving core. Seems to be more of an efficient kind of take what they'll give us sort of approach. But what kind of talent do you think Mendoza's working with out wide right now?
Hunter's an interesting situation. He was a prep recruit a little more than an hour away from Berkeley, and he was a deep threat, really speedy guy, ran a 10.700 in high school. But he seemed kind of overwhelmed last year. He didn't really impress in camp. He dropped a lot of balls, and people weren't really sure what they were going to get out of him. But man, has he turned a corner this year. He had a really good camp, and he's got 4 touchdowns already this season. So, he's pushing the most touchdowns that any receiver had last year, really early this year. The wide receiver room in fall camp was really loaded. You could look at 10 guys that they could put out there that could be very productive in this system. One of the problems is the number one and the number two guys, Tobias Merriweather, who was a portal transfer from Notre Dame, and Keon Grays, who was a portal transfer from Ohio State, they got injured in fall camp and they haven't played it down this season. But it's a testament to the depth that I was talking to you about earlier, that other guys have stepped in and have gotten the job done. Normally, they'd like to stretch the field. They have the weapons to do it. But two of those big weapons to stretch the field and throw deep are sitting on the bench right now, so because they're injured. So you won't see it as much. You'll see it on occasion. You'll see it in the spots. It's more of a ball control passing offense, but they do have a lot of reliable guys behind those two that are out that can get the job done.
Up front, it seems like a pretty experienced laden offensive line. You know, Florida State has a lot of experience on their offensive line, hasn't worked out in their favor. I know left tackle has been a spot there between Nick Morrow and Vic Stofel, where they've, you know, I think, you know, Nick came out of the game a little bit, maybe against Auburn. They had to kind of give him maybe some time to catch his bearings down there, but I think he kind of bounced back maybe this past week. How has he come along at the left tackle spot? Just how confident does the offense seem to be because of an offensive line that has so much experience on it?
Nick's another interesting story. He's a guy that was a tight end in high school, and the Cal staff saw a guy that had the size to play left tackle. And a lot of times, former tight ends, they have the feet and the agility that you like to see in a left tackle. And he had a really good fall camp. In general, I think he's had a pretty solid start to this season, but there's going to be growing pains, and we all knew that would happen. Defenses see a young guy, a redshirt freshman, and they know that they're not always equipped to be able to deal with everything that you throw at them. And Cal has seen some really aggressive defenses this year. So it's a growing thing for him. Again, the line is another testament to the depth of this team. If you would have seen, there's two offensive linemen that have been out every snap of the season also. The center, McDonald, and the right guard, Vadakani, those two guys were keys to this line. Other guys have stepped in, Bastian Swinney and Matthew Willcox and some others, and have gotten the job done in large part. But there's weaknesses there. There's vulnerability. In general, they played fairly solidly. You look at the second half against San Diego State, and they just gashed them. First half, though, it was like, man, what's going on? They changed things up a little bit. They got a little bit more aggressive. They changed the blocking scheme a little bit. So it's hard to say what you will see out of this line this next week. Will you see the line that seemed to take a step forward in the second half and gash the defense? Or will you see the line that struggled to pick up 4th and 1 situations a couple of times? It's a TBD situation there.
All right, let's get to the running backs then. I mean, the running game's been an extremely productive part of the Cal attack so far this year, and it hasn't really been Jaden Ott much, which is everybody's is very familiar with his game. I want to get your thoughts real quick on Jaden Ott, and I think you said that you were able to catch up with the team during their media availability this week before we caught up here on this interview. But, you know, you've spoken to Justin Willcox a bunch. I never have. But listening to his post-game interview after the San Diego State game, he seemed a little bit miffed on Ott not being available to go against San Diego State. Kind of I was expecting him to be ready, but for whatever reason, he decided to not play in this game. It felt more like Jaden's decision rather than the doctor's decision. Where is Jaden right now, do you think? Did Willcox shed any light on his availability this coming week against Florida State?
Yeah, he was asked about the availability of all the guys that were injured, and he essentially implied that everybody but the two receivers were likely to play this week, including Ott. I still think that it will be a reduced workload for him. At 100%, he's one of the most electric backs in the country, but he suffered an injury at the end of the first game, and you could see if you watched any of their second game that he wasn't himself. Auburn, they had a big defensive line, but normally he'd be able to pick up some yards in some situations, and he just didn't have it. The hope is that the rehab has got him to the point where he has some of that explosiveness, that as he's out there, it's not wasted reps, that he has the chance to flash what he's capable of. But that running back room is another room that's very deep. They go 5 deep legit. The guy who really lit it up last week, Javian Thomas, is a true sophomore, and he came in very undersized. I think he played at 170 or 175 last year. And even though he's real fast, you can't take contact at that size. He's significantly stronger, and he didn't lose any speed this year. So he really took advantage of the opportunity that he got to showcase what he could do. And then you saw Kadarius Callaway come on in the second half, and he did some really nice things too. And then a surprise to a lot of people, true freshman Jamal Wiley, he came in and he was a bull. That they call him Baby Marshawn because they have a similar wide base running stance that the defense feels it when he hits you. And then you've got Byron Cardwell, who's a transfer from Oregon that has a lot of talent too, and he's coming off an injury from last year where he's not 100% yet, so you haven't seen the best of him. But yeah, without doubt, they've still been able to run the ball well for the most part when the line is performing well. So that's another testament to the Cal depth for sure.
Byron Cardwell, that's a familiar name to people down here. They were really in the mix for him, and we're bummed out that they lost in Oregon. And interesting to hear that he's surfaced over there in Berkeley. Famous man once said, actually might have been a woman, but that abs are made in the kitchen. So all that working out that we do, Corey and myself, you still got to eat right. And usually that means eating at home, but man, that's so annoying, right? Like all the dishes, having to go to the grocery store, measuring everything out. That's why you should check out HelloFresh. We used to do this a few years ago. Remember everybody, HelloFresh? Go to HelloFresh.com/free Warchant for an offer for 10 free meals, free shipping, and free breakfast for life? ? But this stuff was great. There's literally recipes that they sent me 2-3 years ago that I still use at home, but it doesn't quite hit the same. Some of these spices they use are proprietary, and people on the internet try to match it, but they fall short of the glory of HelloFresh. But these meals show up like properly packed in dry ice. Everything is pretty much proportioned out, so like it helps out with the entire measuring and like utensil usage. Like everything's pretty much ready to go. You just either throw it in the pan, throw it in a bowl, and it lessens the load because like I don't really mind cooking at home. I just hate doing dishes. I found out HelloFresh gave me delicious meals and also lessened the dishwashing aspect component because I don't have anybody to help me out with that stuff. So womp womp for Aslan. Check out HelloFresh. Again, HelloFresh.com/free Warchant for an awesome introductory offer. Let's flip it to the defense now. I know Justin Willcox is he's a defensive-minded guy, but Peter Surman entitled as a defensive coordinator. I remember Surman down in Starkville at Mississippi State. He was much maligned, to kind of put it mildly, ended up going to Louisville and not, getting things back on track there either. And it seems like he's been a bit of a stabilizing force, or maybe he's kind of found his niche out there in Berkeley. This defense, let's start, I guess, on the run side of things. Florida State's running game has been putrid. They are the second worst running game in the entire nation right now. Where's the confidence level, I guess, in this running defense being able to hem things up? It seems like that's going to be a major part of it. And what has sort of been the growth you've seen from maybe Peter Surman as a DC for Cal?
Well, I asked Surman about a sort of a similar line of questioning today. I mentioned that he kind of got a rep with Cal fans as being a risk-averse, conservative defensive coordinator, and sort of a bend but not break situation, and that can be frustrating for fans. And I asked, you've got now the type of talent on both sides of the ball, all three levels of the ball, of the defense, that you can play a more aggressive style. Is that kind of who you are rather than what we've seen in these last few years? And he didn't really answer it directly, but you could tell. I know he's wanted to play aggressively, and they've had to give up on it when the defensive backfield wasn't capable of playing man coverage. You can't play aggressive on the defensive line if you're playing zone defense. It just doesn't work. He's got some lockdown DBs this year, especially with Noel Williams and Harris, Marcus Harris. Those guys, man, they're money. So they've been able to unleash the defensive line a lot more. And Aiden Keana is a good example of that. He transferred from Notre Dame and he was injured a lot there, didn't get a lot of playing time, but he's killing it. There's a lot of other big guys up the middle, Ricky Correa and Stanley McKenzie and Nate Burrell. And then they use a 2-4-5 defense. So the outside linebackers function as defensive ends. And Xavier Carlton had a breakout game. He's a big 6'7", 275-pound guy that had 2.5 sacks last week. And even though they had their best pass rusher out for the most part, most of the season, David Reese, they've still been able to be productive in the pass rush. So the middle linebackers, I think, is what really is the straw that stirs the drink. Cade Uluave and Teddy Buchanan, those guys, man, they get it done. They'll chase you sideline to sideline. They hit you hard. They know where the play is going. They know what they're doing out there. So being able to put guys out on the field at all three levels for the first time, really, I think in the Willcox era, or maybe since early in the Willcox era, that they can count on, that makes a big difference in their style of play. So I think any yards that Florida State's going to earn on the ground, they're going to be hard-earned yards. There's a lot of talent on that Florida State roster. So believe me, everybody knows that the light can come on at any time. So nobody's expecting Cal to run through anybody. Everybody is thinking if 0-3 or not, if they can come out with a win, this is going to be a big win. So everybody's just dying to see how it's going to play out, honestly.
You touched on it. I just want to get maybe a little bit more your thoughts on Buchanan and Uluave. You know, I'm the guy that I've minimized the importance of linebacker play over the last few years of doing this podcast. And, you know, Florida State had a pair of really talented linebackers last year. They weren't very heralded. They weren't very decorated as recruits, but clearly now we know that they were very talented because they were part of a very successful defense. And Florida State does not have that kind of production, leadership, et cetera, at linebacker. Just how much of that defense, the success, do you think is because of Buchanan and Uluave and just the way they've been playing? And how real does that feel that it's not, you know, just a 3-game spurt, but these are really, truly pieces that are going to keep the Cal defense stout and sturdy?
These guys are the heart and soul of this Cal defense. David Reese, the guy I mentioned, who was their sack leader, he's kind of their vocal and emotional leader, but these guys are right there. They're both an interesting story too. Cade is a guy that was kind of a middle of the pack level recruit out of Utah. Not a ton of offers. They were really thin at running back with injuries last year. He had played some running back in high school, so they moved him to running back as a true freshman. They got desperate at linebacker because there were so many injuries at middle linebacker that they flipped him back. And then he had to start as a true freshman halfway through the season. And what happens? He becomes a freshman All-American. When in the world do you see something like that happen? Yeah. The guy's a beast. Yeah. Teddy Buchanan's a guy that Cal looked at out of high school. He was kind of undersized. He played in San Francisco, and you know, you think in San Francisco you'd have a lot of talent. There'd be a lot of recruits there, but you don't see a lot of talent coming out of the city. That's starting to change now in recent years with Archbishop Reardon and St. Ignatius and a few others. But he kind of got his feet wet with UC Davis, a small FCS program that's usually a top 20 program at FCS. He built himself up, and Cal eventually saw a guy that they thought, this is an ideal guy to plug into our defense. We think he's got a style that fits what we're trying to do. He's aggressive. He's intelligent. He's strong. He's everything that you want in a middle linebacker. I mean, if you want a prototype, maybe you add a couple of inches to him. But at a college level, big time. And Cal's middle linebackers have a long legacy. I think the gold standard in the Willcox era, Evan Weaver is a guy that led the nation in tackles, and I think he had almost 200 tackles his senior year. That's just insane volume of tackles. They've always had these guys that they can plug into Surman's system that are really productive, and to have both of them be pretty much on an equal level, it's a huge key for Cal's defense.
All right, last thing on the way out. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, I think Cal got the better of Ole Miss not too long ago. They were down in Auburn just a few weeks ago and took out Auburn and you know, kind of made them shuffle up the way they were having to look at their quarterback position. How much confidence do you think there is from Cal playing on a stage like this, playing a foe in the Southeast? How much confidence do they have? Because maybe not even the Ole Miss game, but just Auburn having so recently and just the spat of success they've had to start off the year.
Well, one thing that you know about a Willcox team is you're never going to have an overconfident team. He just won't let them get there. So I know they see Florida State start. I know they know they're 0-3. But believe me, they're reminded every hour of every day that they're in the coaches' offices or meeting rooms or on the field how much talent the Florida State roster has. So there's no way they'll go in there overconfident. I think they're going in there with a little bit more of a spring in their step because of the good start and being able to win in a place like Jordan-Hare Stadium at Auburn. I think that's equipped them a little bit better to be able to come into this type of hostile situation with more confidence. But they're ready for battle, and they know they're going to be in for a battle. FSU is not going to roll over, and they know that very well.
All right, we'll find out 7 p.m. ESPN2 Eastern time when Cal comes to town to take on Florida State. First ever ACC game for the Cal Golden Bears. Jim McGill breaking everything down with us here on Wake Up Warchant from Bear Insider, bearinsider.com. Jim, thanks for doing this, man. And I don't know if you're going to be making out to Tallahassee or not, but safe travels.
Absolutely.
All
Absolutely.
right,
can't wait. Wouldn't miss it.
All right. I'll try to shake your hand up there in the press box. Thanks for taking time out. Appreciate it.